Unlike the last breakdown video I did, I do not have the project file for this one, so I'm just going to walk you through it through my media player, starting with the intro, which my little headcanon for this is just that someone is waking up from a sleepwalk, essentially. So this camera shake motion is designed to emulate the motion of someone walking and pulling a camera, basically, or in this case, it would just be the perspective from their eyes. And I normally use Sapphire Shake, but this is actually the native camera shake effect within DaVinci Resolve because the default camera shake looks very close to a walking animation. So I didn't have to do a lot of tweaking on this. And then I just fade in from a blur. And regarding the text, it's just a simple plain art track, but you'll notice that it's kind of weird on the compositing side of things. It's very bright compared to the rest of it. I guess you could say it's not even white balanced, really, but I wanted it to specifically be out of place. I wanted it to be unusually bright. So I could see why some people might not like that. I didn't really get any comments on it, but that was my personal decision on how to handle the text. And it's the same thing here, just a composition with two planar tracks. And here, I did a very lazy depth of field with the qualifier in Resolve. Basically, I selected this color and did some matte cleanup to fill in the black areas. And this didn't meet the qualification, so it remained unblurred. And this did end up getting blurred. And then this area right here is just an inverted mask so that it's not blurred around the text, because obviously that's supposed to be a point in focus. And starting with this point right here, this begins the theme of continuity shown throughout the video, which I did pretty much the same way as I explained in Death Machine 3, even though this video did come out first. Basically, all the transitions are just a matter of taking an angle, meeting from the first perspective from the end of one clip to the beginning of the next clip, and then I would chroma key the sniper or the BR, whatever they're holding, the animation of them pulling it out and putting it away so that there's some continuity between that. So that's all over the place in this video just to connect all the clips, because every single shot fired or grenade thrown in this video is a separate clip. There's no back-to-back shots. So the real challenge was finding how all the pieces fit together. And I'll kind of explain that as I go through. Starting with this is just me being stupid and putting random shit in there just because I can motion track and sometimes I feel like doing it. But this is just pointing to where, oh, the player is going backwards in the next clip. But even though I did that, I failed to maintain continuity right here because I forgot that there's not supposed to be a barrel there. So this was a sneaky little part because I didn't have enough time to put an angle in between these clips. So what I did is I pan and cropped on the wall down here by S1 and then cross dissolved as I panned into the floor here because there's such a similar texture, especially with so much motion blur, you can't really tell the difference. So that kind of acts as a hidden jump cut between the clips. And these are, yet again, two separate clips. And the way I did this is the jump cut is right here as I'm turning and the grenade explodes. You'll notice the weapon actually changes from BR to snipe. So that was just a jump cut, but the player position is so similar that you can just kind of get away with it. And here, the cross dissolve is right as I'm zooming out. It's very hard to see. It's like 2 frames. And as I'm zoomed out, there's another player. And then it's my clip and I'm sniping Zutrukio. And yet again, it was the same kind of transitional thing here where I quickly zoomed into the wall and used that as a point of transitioning with the angle. This effect right here was using the qualifier on the reddish yellow color from the muzzle flash, and as well as the shield flare, you'll see it blended in too. And because it's a qualification, not a motion track or a mask, it actually applied in my scope too, which is kind of cool. And then within the qualifier, I basically said, okay, within this section, I want to use S Zap, which is Sapphire's lightning effect. So I just kind of sprinkled that throughout. And this is a very basic masking transition. And I did, I think, two of these that I wish were done more carefully, because when you're idling with the Spartan, there's that breathing animation and your weapon kind of bobs up and down. They weren't in sync when I did the masking transition. So you can see a little bit of an offset. And I kind of wish that I waited for a point on this clip to where the breathing animation was the same and then mask it that way so it's actually seamless. But I don't know. I probably could have done a bit better if I feathered this, and I didn't for some reason. So that's what it looks like in both cases, or all three cases that I do it in this video. I don't remember how many times. This right here, yet again, just some random lazy motion tracking stuff on my part. I was originally going to have an animation of a Spartan chasing another guy, just like in the part that I scrapped from Death Machine 3, oddly enough. But the reason it didn't go in here is because I was having a glitch in Fusion where it wasn't motion tracking video mats onto my layer. So I just took a universe component. This is HUD components, and I just added some random spinny looking thing. I'm like, I already had tracking data, so I felt like putting something there. There's really no value to this. But this is the sneaky transition between the two clips right here. I will say this does, I guess, help distract from the fact that there's a transition. But this clip is Zertrukio's because he has orange armor, and the next clip is mine because I have blue armor. So what I did is I keyframed his arm color over time to be blue. I know it's kind of rough, but it gets the point across. Because if it was a jump cut from blue to orange, it would have been more noticeable. But the turning point is where I actually do the jump cut between clips. So it's right on this frame, you can't actually see the player, and then bam, there he is. So with that amount of motion, you don't really see it. You get to trick the viewer a little bit. This is another component from that particle illusion software that I explained in Death Machine 3, where I made the title screen. So this is kind of inspired from B2P by GTS and Thomas XP. If you guys know that video, it's a Halo 2 video that has no HUD clips, just like this one. And there was a part where GTS masked the guy and had him animated through the pillar. So I wanted to do the same sort of thing where I added some continuity to showing the player's movement through the pillar. So I added this little thing that was motion tracked and followed him through the pillar that blocked the sight line. But just to add a little bit more to it, I had a little rotation point to sync to the beat with it. Those two little clicks, you can see it and hear it. This is the section I got the most questions on. So this is yet again quite easy. This whole part was just qualifying yet again this color, doing some matte control to get the blackened areas in there as well. And it was a combination of two effects. So the qualification made it so I didn't have to mask this at all. Just this whole texture gets affected. And I did a kaleidoscope effect, and I keyframed it to spin. And then I did a luma key on the darkest parts, because these were actually black originally. So I luma keyed the darkest parts, and then I added Universe Ecto to give it that purple glow around the edges. So I guess technically three effects if you count the luma key. So it's just a spinning kaleidoscope with a luma keyed section with Universe Ecto. And that was all done for me in terms of masking and whatnot because the qualifier. This is the other part I got a lot of questions on, which is how did I make the room do this? And yet again, this is just a matter of the qualifier. So I took this color, and the doorways were therefore left alone because that is the point I wanted to be continuous. I was going to mask out the lights, but I realized that it left some geometry on here, so I actually left that alone. And what I did is, at first when throwing the nade, this is actually the transition point. And when the doorway falls away, I left this little bit here. Again, just a directional point to where the viewer should look. But the wall was qualified, and the effect I put on it was Sapphire Warp Transform. And just like that Death Machine 3 effect on that midship clip that I explained before, it's just an effect that applies translation in terms of X and Y shifting and 2.5D skewing. And so here I tilted it back. That's what I told Resolve to do under this qualification, was tilt the video back, and then I made it snap back into place. And I just added a glow for effect. And then here I just have another basic mask transition. Right here, this is actually more Universe Ecto and a Luma key. So, I just made it look a lot more flat, so it looked very different from the kaleidoscope version around the wall and door earlier. This is, yet again, just a qualification on the Spartan, so it ignores him, but everything else has a directional blur that I keyframe to rotate. This one was a little tricky with this masking transition, not this part, but the one after it. So what I had to do is zoom in to meet the perfect point where this wall at the opening of BR2 would actually cover the entire screen so that I could mask it as a full wipe. So you can see that normally when I did a wiping transition, the sniper would be in line with the sniper because they're the same size, right? Well, because I zoomed in to get that crop, you can actually see two instances of the sniper. So it's a little sloppy, but that's how I was able to get my seamless transition without an angle, basically. This right here is the same transition that I also explained in Death Machine 3. It is Sapphire Warp Repeat, which is basically just the video and then it repeats the edges. So I keyframe that to go from full size to zoom out and then fade out. This is some pixel sorter. This is a Sapphire plugin as well. And then I did some qualification to ignore the Spartan. And yet again, as it snapped on the beat, I just added some glow. And here, this red was pretty easy. This was just a slider in DaVinci Resolve's color tools called color temperature. And it's designed to provide your color grade with a warmer or cooler look. But I just cranked it all the way up and made it super red. And so I did that to add a contrast to the part that was being masked to, which this is obviously the door to library, which I just masked out, and then essentially masked to the same location like 2 feet away. So it seems continuous because it's close, but it's not, because this door is the same as right over here. This was a little rough. I didn't get any remarks on this, but I'm always going to hate myself for it. If you pay attention to the lighting on the armor and the weapon here, during the angle, that compositing is really rough. It's way more contrasty and dark than the actual footage. And it is just there for a second, and it's not the main point of focus for the viewer, but there's a few times this happens, and it always bothers me. I should have gone back and actually spent time to make it look better. This right here, I did a lazy qualification. I think it was just a Luma key to cut out the Spartan. And the reason I left it sloppy is because this guy is really dark, and the edge of this is really dark. So I wanted it to where it would actually show up as this transition was happening. And this transition also comes from particle illusion. It's somewhere in the tunnel or the vortex section. I just changed some of the colors, added some glow in the middle, and keyframed the size and rotation speed so that it looked how I wanted. So, and then I just keyframed the glow to basically fade it to white and then jump cut to black and then fade into the screen. This is a Luma key of the sky with Sapphire Chroma Distort. And I really didn't have to do any refinement of the mask. It was a very clean Luma key. And that just kind of gives it that warpy look that I wanted. Again, kind of like a lot of the effects in this video are designed to be from the perspective of someone in a dream. Because, like I said, the intro is supposed to be like someone waking up from a sleepwalk or them just walking into the dream, however you want to view it. Um, this part right here, all this was a qualification on luminance for the blur. So the brightest part did not get blurred, everything else did, and it fades out as a focus point. And as the shield flare goes away, it all gets blurred because there was no longer luminance to maintain that clarity. And the jump cut on this is right on the turning point. As you can see, it snaps to a sniper, but people seem to be usually distracted by the turning aspect and they didn't notice that there was a jump cut. This is probably the laziest continuity point that I had in the whole video because it was too short for an angle and I didn't know how else to connect it. So they were just relatively close and I snapped it on the beat that happens right there. This part I got a lot of questions on too, which was this morph between the BR and the sniper. And that was actually done rather improperly. So in Fusion, there is a tool called a grid warp, which is exactly what you think it is. It's just, it draws a bunch of lines on the screen, and then you can take the vertices between those points and keyframe them to warp the image over time. So I took the BR, and what I actually did is, you'll notice the first flaw is right here. Notice how much motion blur there is, except around this area, because I created a mask that was in the shape of the sniper, and then I warped BR to match that shape. So that's why it kind of warps and then fits into the shape of the sniper. But the proper method to do this would have been to take the actual edges of the BR and then keyframe it to match the size of the snipe instead of just stretching the overall textures and skewing them in a relative direction, if that makes sense. So yes, it did transition it, but it was rather improper. And the actual jump cut was right at the end of this turn, if you were wondering. So it, like, right when I'm looking about at this point is when the jump cut happens. And this is yet again just a Luma key. I did a small mask so it didn't Luma this part. And then I used BCC stars. I honestly could have done this very easily with Fusion particles, but I hadn't spent any time with particles yet to know how to do this. This was actually only my third video in DaVinci Resolve, so I was still very new to the software. And so once I had that key, I just animated the stars to have some motion to the side. In the back here is particle illusion again with a little bit of smoke type stuff. This could have been done with fast noise, again, if I was more educated on the software at the time. And right here is another little particle illusion thing, which I decided to use as a little throwback to that other motion tracked particle thing I had on the wall, the one that was just there because I couldn't do the other thing, just as a callback to it, to, I guess, give it purpose. And then I just kind of snapped to black. Regarding the actual color correction for this video, it was originally inspired by a video I made. Wow, it's really been that long. Um, Back in 2019 called Penumbra. And this was edited back when I used Vegas. And all my coloring was done with Magic Bullet looks because Vegas is severely lacking on coloring tools. So this is the inspiration for the color grade on Pendulum. But this used native DaVinci Resolve color tools. And I kind of tweaked it a bit. I made it more purple, modified how much glow I had. The opacity of the glow was higher to deliberately blow out the highlights a bit more to have that more dreamy look. Whereas here, it just looks like the sky is kind of bright. So I wanted to have that kind of distinction. But the type of blues in the grayish part of the walls and the extra saturation on the tan type colors, especially on lockout, those are the points that I wanted to focus on carrying over from the color grade. But other than that, I think that's about it. So if anybody wants me to do some more of these breakdowns on videos I've made in the past, let me know and I will consider doing them.